On Wednesday last week, the Love Triangle murder trial entered day 9 in Austin, Texas, and we are finally getting all caught up. This is the case of Texas v. Kaitlin Armstrong, where the defendant is accused of murdering Mo Wilson, a professional cyclist, out of feelings of jealousy towards Mo after finding out that Mo previously and briefly dated Kaitlin's boyfriend, Colin. If you are not familiar with this case, linked in the description below is a playlist to a bunch of videos so you can see what every single day of trial has been like up to this point. And on day 9, the prosecution started by officially resting their case in chief. Because the prosecution has the burden of proof, they get to go first. However, because the defense gets to rebut the prosecution's case in chief, this means that the prosecution is kind of working without the benefit of seeing how the defense is going to put on what they have. And so this is why the prosecution gets to reserve some of their time for rebuttal after the defense has put on their case in chief. And so on day 9, after the prosecution rested, the defense put on their entire case in chief. This totaled 5 witnesses. And after that, the prosecution called one final witness for rebuttal before closing out the testimony for this trial entirely. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first witness for the defense was Erin LaGrone. Miss LaGrone is a senior latent print examiner with the Austin Forensic Science Department, and so she was an expert witness for the defense for fingerprint analysis. She went into all the detail about what fingerprints are, how they're analyzed, and more. And as she said, she was also the latent print examiner for this case in particular. Prints were taken all over Cash's apartment and provided to Miss LaGrone for analysis on August 2nd, 2022. And one thing the defense really wanted to hammer in is that Miss LaGrone was asked to compare all of these fingerprints to the defendant and no one else. This, of course, is because the defense wants to make the argument that the police improperly narrowed their investigation to focus on Kaitlin when they should have left it open to other potential suspects. But if you think about it, by the time she started her analysis on August 2nd, 2022, Kaitlin had already fled to Costa Rica, gotten major facial plastic surgery, and then been found and brought back to the United States. So this was not exactly early in the investigation. Anyways, it turns out they didn't find any fingerprints matching Kaitlin Armstrong. So for the prosecution, it's a bit of a nothing burger considering they have the evidence of Kaitlin's DNA on Mo's bicycle already. Okay, the next witness is Officer Gordon Niels of the Austin Police Department. This is the officer who arrested Kaitlin on May 12th, 2022 for an unrelated warrant concerning a service theft. There wasn't really much to this testimony except that the defense wanted Officer Niels to talk about Kaitlin's demeanor while getting arrested and going to the APD. Basically, the entire time, Kaitlin was calm and seemed almost indifferent. But I really don't think that this moves the needle in either direction because the jury has already heard and seen plenty of evidence of Kaitlin's actions that show something above indifference since this initial arrest. I'm talking, of course, about her fleeing to Costa Rica and then trying to bust out of jail from her doctor's appointment. Anyway, the next witness was Matthew Quartaro. He is a forensic DNA consultant and obviously here to duke it out as an expert against the prosecution's DNA expert. Now, in terms of the testing procedures of this case, Mr. Quartaro said he didn't recognize any serious flaws. And then he confirmed that Kaitlin's DNA was found on 2 parts of Mo's bicycle, along with an unknown person, not matching any of the other 4 profiles that they were using. After that, he goes into the idea of transfer DNA. This is the same concept that the defense highlighted in cross-examination of the prosecution's DNA expert. Then on Mr. Quartaro's cross-examination, he told the prosecution that a person might shed more DNA if they were nervous or because their hands were sweaty. This, of course, is highly interesting to the prosecution because Kaitlin arguably would have been in a high-stress situation if she shot Mo 3 times and then decided to wheel her bicycle out of Cash's apartment. But then on redirect, Mr. Quartaro also said that a motorcycle helmet could also have more DNA in it because it could cause someone to sweat, especially if wearing it during a Texas hot summer, for example. All right, the next witness is William Tobin, an expert on firearms and tool marks. He is also going to be the final expert witness for the defense. He is there to rebut the prosecution's ballistics expert testimony. In my opinion, the ballistics testimony was probably the weakest point in the prosecution's case in chief. In the end, it sounded like the science was a little wonky and maybe not so reliable, so this would be fruitful ground for the defense. Unfortunately, though, the witness also was testifying by a Zoom conference call. If you've watched trials with us in the past on this channel, you might be familiar with the experience of Zoom testimony. And it's just an unfortunate reality that it's harder to pay attention to a witness when they're testifying out of the courtroom. It's not as bad as when the parties introduce deposition video testimony, but it's still not ideal, and particularly when that witness is an expert witness. This is because usually lay witnesses are there to testify to some kind of a narrative, something that they experienced. But on the other hand, an expert witness is there to testify to explain something technical from a particular field, and that can be very dry and sometimes boring. But anyway, Mr. Tobin testified that he kind of has made a name for himself by challenging many findings in research that had been supported in the forensic community for a long time. He cast doubt on the ballistics forensics profession as a whole, to include the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners, or AFTE. He said the AFTE is a trade organization, not a scientific organization. And so he said that the standards of study and review by the AFTE and its members was very insular, it's not very blinded, and it's just not scientific enough. For example, there's no scientific accepted protocol for firearms and toolmark examinations. He also said that terms like sufficient agreement, which was used by the prosecution's ballistics expert, are some of the most flawed, worthless statements and claims, according to him. And he testified that the AFTE theory cannot be called protocol, only guidelines.
More what you call guidelines than actual rules.
But as I said, this testimony was dry and technical to begin with, and matters were not helped by the fact that he testified by Zoom. It's really unclear just how much the jury was paying attention during this testimony. And really, it's not ideal to end your entire case in chief with testimony that bores the jury to tears. And from what I could tell, like I said, everyone in the courtroom was bored to tears with this testimony. As I've mentioned before, the latency/recency effect means that the jury is going to remember what was presented first and last most. And if the thing that the jury hears last from the defense is dry, technical expert testimony that kind of puts them to sleep, one of the things that they're going to remember most about the defense case in chief is that they had a whole lot of nothing to present. And I think that this is one of the reasons why the defense recalled Colin Strickland as their final witness. Remember that at the end of his testimony earlier in the trial, he was not dismissed from the trial entirely. Instead, he was subject to a recall per request by the defense. But remember, the defense has already had an opportunity to question him. So the things that they can get into here can't be things that they've specifically already talked about previously in this trial. To clarify, they can revisit some topics, but the defense can't go in and just ask all the same questions as before. There has to be something new here. Anyway, here they mostly asked him about his motorcycle helmets, the gun locks, his vandalism report, and the false alibi that he gave to Kaitlin as to where he was on earlier in the day on May 11th, 2022. Colin testified that he has 5 helmets and that he has worn all of them. He also testified that Kaitlin has worn 2 of them, but that he can't remember the last time that she did. Also, he said she had her own motorcycle helmets that she would typically use. And regarding the gun locks, Colin basically said he couldn't remember how the gun lock got on Kaitlin's gun. Kind of a nothing burger. Then they revisited the vandalism report that he made to the police. The defense, of course, wanted to highlight this to show that this was a potentially highly relevant avenue of investigation and that the police failed to investigate it. And of course, the defense wanted to land the plane, so to speak, with the idea that Colin is a lying liar who lies because he lied to Kaitlin about where he was earlier that day on May 11th, 2022. Basically, that's it. Nothing to move the needle, in my opinion, above anything that we had already previously heard from Colin Strickland. After this, the defense rested their case, but not before giving Kaitlin the final opportunity to testify on her behalf. As should surprise no one, she decided not to testify. Looking strategically at this case, it's mostly a case about forensics. And so it really wouldn't help her case all that much to testify. But on the other hand, there are many ways in which testifying could harm her case. So in my opinion, this was a pretty sound decision by the defense / by Kaitlin. So the defense then rested their case after going through Kaitlin's rights with the judge concerning testifying. The prosecution then had one final witness to put on. This was Dr. Tim Kalafut. He is a forensic scientist from Sam Houston State University, and he was testifying as another DNA expert. The purpose of this testimony was really to tie up any loose ends that may have developed as a result of the defense's DNA expert testimony. And remember, it is crucial to the state that the jury be locked in with the prosecution on this. That's because the digital evidence makes it pretty clear that Kaitlin was closely stalking Mo on May 11th, 2022. But the state needs something convincing to not only place Kaitlin outside Cash's apartment, but inside it as well. And there's one question that may have arisen about the DNA as a result of the defense's DNA expert testimony. And that is the theory of transfer DNA. Could it be that Mo got Kaitlin's DNA on her head from Colin's motorcycle helmet? And could Mo have then touched her hair before handling her bicycle inside the apartment? In my opinion, these questions are really the only ones standing in the way of Kaitlin's conviction at this point. If the state can resolve those, they can probably close the door on any reasonable doubt that Kaitlin Armstrong murdered Mo Wilson. And in my opinion, that's exactly what this testimony achieved. Dr. Kalafut first testified that it's highly improbable that Kaitlin's DNA would have been transferred to Mo after Mo was first picked up. This is because Mo then went swimming in the Deep Eddy pool. Any DNA on her head from the helmet would have been cleaned right off by the pool's water. And he said it's also highly unlikely that Mo could have passed Kaitlin's DNA to her own bicycle. The steps required to get there would be at least 4 transfers. But Dr. Kalafut said that he only knows of 2 studies where transfer DNA was successfully passed down 4 times and survived. And he said in those cases, the DNA had to be highly amplified in order for those to survive. And so he concluded that it's way more likely that Kaitlin placed her own DNA on the bicycle, not that Mo transferred it to the bicycle. To be totally honest with you, I didn't even think about the implications of Mo going swimming related to the transfer DNA theory. But now that Dr. Kalafut mentioned it, it definitely makes it seem even less likely that Kaitlin's DNA could have successfully transferred to Mo's bicycle through Colin's helmet. But that's all for day 9 and the end of the testimony in this trial. At the beginning of this trial, opening statements gave me a strong impression that the state was going to basically bury Kaitlin in digital receipts. And boy, did they deliver. This is such a strong case to me that it's wild to think that Kaitlin was reportedly offered a plea deal and rejected it. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do you think that the prosecution wrapped this case up nicely for conviction, or are there still questions that you think are open after all of the evidence has been presented? Let us know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this, or at least found it interesting or informative. And if you did, I would love it if you could hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're new here and you want to see more trial coverage like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded. See you in the next one.